Once again, my name is Wan Chen. Welcome to the webinar on the importance of communicating purpose in turbulent times. This webinar is a series of 8 webinars that we've been doing together with the Working Capital. And the timing for today will be scheduled to end about 8 p.m. and about 50 slides, including a segment with Lakshmi Rajagopalan from Rapid. In terms of the synopsis, this is a screen that you see. It follows exactly the same as what we have advertised on the Zoom registration page. If you focus your eyes on the words highlighted in maroon, the main topic that I'm going to cover today is really how to have a framework to enable you to choose the right purpose for your organization. So what you will go away with is a framework to be able to choose the right purpose for an organization. Well, whether it's right or wrong is really for you to decide. But at least you have a framework that you can go away with. It's a takeaway with from this webinar. And the second area that we're going to cover today is what's the link between purpose, values, culture, and strategy, and whether there are regulatory frameworks in place to link this together. And finally, some examples and case study as to what are the best practices in communicating your purpose. And along the way, we'll have the discussions on purpose and profits, purpose and culture, purpose and strategy, purpose and business models, and how we will learn that purpose is more than just a hype, that is becoming a very real thing in today's world. And it's not something that's Zen, and we need to go beyond that, and something that is implementable within your organization, and also something that you can adopt as a personal purpose, and how that's linked together with the organizational purpose. So today is a very practical session on how to implement purpose for both yourself and within the organization, and how that links to your stakeholders also. And of course, a special feature, a conversation with Lakshmi Rajagopalan, Director, Program Management Office at Rapid, a global fintech payments company. And once again, if you have questions along the way, please do post your questions on the Q&A function or on the chat function of Zoom. A bit of background myself that you can see on the screen right now. You can connect with me via email address that is listed on the screen, or you can connect me on LinkedIn. Okay, with that, thank you everybody once again for joining the webinar today. I will now go straight into the guts of the webinar today, starting with how does purpose fit into the big picture, and then we'll zoom in on the various components of purpose, so that once again, the key thing is that I would like you to go away with is a practical framework on how to determine the right purpose for your organization. And if you have one already in terms of having a purpose, you can benchmark your purpose against this framework to determine whether it's the right one or not. So very practical. but at the same time, not to going too far away from that Zen feeling of purpose, which is really internalized in most of us. What's the most valuable currency today? And we believe that it is trust. And that's the starting point from today as to how we have decided on the 8 topics for the webinar series that we have developed together with the Working Capital. We have run a series of webinars already over the last few weeks, starting with corporate culture. Let's do an annotation. So we started with corporate culture, stakeholder engagement, business model, risk management, value creation, and today we're focusing on purpose here. And we have another 2 more to go, a tone at the top, and we'll cap up the whole thing with a sustainability framework. So the reason why we chose these 8 topics is that we believe that they all lead to one road to Rome, as we may call it. We call it trust in this case. But they not just lead to trust, but they're all intertwined. Like for example, purpose, as we discuss purpose today, we will realize that it's linked to the business model. It's linked to stakeholder engagement. It's linked to tone at the top. It's linked to corporate culture. It's linked to value creation. And it's linked to risk management. And of course, it's linked to being sustainable in the long term for value creation. So they're intertwined. And if you didn't attend the previous webinars, they're all on YouTube on the Black Sun channel. You can watch the webinars recording on all the previous topics that we've covered, from corporate culture, stakeholder engagement, business model, risk management, value creation. And of course, today's recording will be available tomorrow once we finish with it today. And the next webinar after today will be the tone at the top. And on 13th of August, we'll cap it off with a sustainability framework, how to sustain all this on an ongoing basis to create trust for your stakeholders. So it's all links together. And as we go through the slides today, you'll see how we all are all intertwined. So let's start with what is purpose, so that we start drilling down into the various components of purpose. So we look at it from a big picture point of view, that purpose is linked to trust. And that's a starting point. But what indeed is purpose itself? And as you do deep into purpose, you realize that it comprises of things like strategy, business model, culture, values. And these are the things that purpose is made up of. And we will dive into each of these specific topics as we go along the slide. Now, the challenge is that purpose has a very Zen feeling to it, and many organizations feel that purpose does not have a place to play within the organization. But that's far from the truth. As we progress on the presentation, I will soon present the case that purpose is a very important part of the organizational structure, just as important as strategy, mission, and vision. Purpose is that missing factor in many organizations. And in fact, as we will look at the integrated reporting framework that I will share with you in a little while, purpose is the latest addition to the business model of organizations. And without purpose, the picture is not complete. And the reason why I wanted to show you this slide on the broader perspective of purpose is that it goes beyond that Zen feeling as to, purpose is to be happy, purpose is not to be happy, purpose is the reason for being, and your purpose is to find your purpose. So it's nice to have such sayings or quotes from famous people, famous personalities, but from a corporate point of view, we need something very practical to be able to implement it. And really, that's the purpose of today's session, is to give you something practical to go away with that you can implement within your organization, something a bit more lasting, something that goes beyond these Zen quotes, which are nice to have, good to post on Facebook, good to post on Instagram, but something that is practical, be useful for us from a corporate perspective. And there are 1,001 books on purpose. One of the more famous one is by Simon Sinek, Finding Your Why. If you want to feel an undying passion for the work, we need to find our why. And what is your why is what Simon Sinek talks about. So from Zen quotes to a lot of corporate books, And in fact, including myself, I wrote a book on purpose, and you can download the book free of charge. You're looking at the QR code there. So how do we distill down all these Zen quotes, all the books on purpose, and coming into a practical framework so that you can have a good takeaway to implement purpose within your organization? And what we have done is that we've distilled down purpose into one sentence. Why do we do what we do within the organization? So that's a starting point from what we've done by distilling down all these quotes, all these books. We've done research over the last 4 years, we meaning Blackson and myself, and we find that this statement here or this question here is a useful starting point for corporates to start with defining the purpose within the organization. So why do we do what we do? And from here, we're able to then focus on how it links to your vision and mission and purpose. So vision is what do we want to be, mission is what do we do, and purpose is the why behind what we do and where do we want to go. So purpose is the why behind the what we do and where do we want to go. So purpose, as you will soon see, is a starting point for everything that we do. So there's always a why behind the what, there's always a why behind the where, and there's always a why behind the how. I've not shown the how yet, but soon we will. How is your strategy? So there's a why behind the how, there's a why behind the what, and the how, there's a why behind the where. So the starting point for everything that we do is purpose, the why. And that's really the missing link that we see in many organizations where they've not defined the purpose. And it's really the starting point. The starting point for most organizations is purpose. And in fact, the definition of purpose is also at the start of the evolution is how companies are seen in terms of serving their stakeholders. So what you've seen now is, let me bring up the, oops. So as we come to this point here, we've talked about mission, and we talked about vision. We talk about quotes. The Zen quotes. And we talk about books. So what we've done is that at this point in time, we have distilled everything down into one starting point for corporates. And we will now focus on this part here. And from here, how do we then start creating that framework for defining purpose in organizations? And by framework, I mean a way of thinking, an approach, a methodology, something that's practical, that allows you to, on a daily basis, verify that what you do has a purpose, that where you're gonna go has a purpose, and how you do things has a purpose to it. Let me clear this drawing. When you get the slides, you will also notice that at the bottom of every page, there's a quote and the title. So this quote comes from Larry Fink's, the founder, chairman, and CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment company in the world. And the 2019 letter is what we call a milestone letter that starts to define purpose for organizations. So in here, his quote is that purpose is not just merely a tagline or marketing campaign. And that's really the challenge in many organizations. When they look at purpose, they think that it's a marketing campaign or a tagline. And you need to dispel that from that perspective. So as organizations start to adopt a purpose statement or a purpose approach, for the organization. You need to make sure that you are not looking at it from a tagline or a marketing approach, that it is a fundamental reason for being every day to create value for stakeholders. So remember the 8 components of trust we talked about: stakeholders, value creation. So here you have 2 components of trust: value creation and stakeholders. So now you're beginning to see how they start to intertwine. The purpose does not stand alone itself. So for purpose to work, it must create value. For purpose to work, it must create value for the right stakeholder groups or the right stakeholders. And we soon learn that there are 5 stakeholder groups that we're addressing. So trust brings together purpose, value creation, and the right stakeholders. And it is not just a tagline, but something that you do every day, every moment. So when you want to do something, your what, there's a why behind the what. So what you do every day, there's a why. How you want to achieve your strategy, there's a why behind it. Where do you want to go in terms of vision, there's a why behind it. So there's what we call a animating force, a reason for being, or what the Japanese call it the ikigai. So we're now drilling down into some of the basic components of purpose, and purpose is made up of value creation and value creation for the right stakeholders. And they all lead to trust. And at this point in time, you should be feeling that there's a framework forming in your mind. So the 8 components of the framework for trust, comprising purpose, value creation, and stakeholders. We'll talk about these 3 components of trust, and that framework starts to form in your mind. And once you get the slides tomorrow or later today, after this webinar, do read the full statement of the 2019 Larry Fink's letter. It is a very seminal letter in the sense that it sets a milestone for purpose creation within organizations. So what I'm going to do is to do a little poll, and you can provide your answer through the chat function here. What company is this? So this company's purpose statement is to unite the world through sport, to create a healthy planet, active communities, and an equal playing field for all. Which company is this? Any guesses? So we got 1 response. So Erica says it's Adidas. Close, but no prizes. Any other guesses as to which company is this? To unite the world through sport, to create a healthy planet, active communities, and an equal playing field for all. Shanini says Nike, and Sharanta says Olympics. Patrick says Nike. So we got Olympics, Adidas, Nike as the 3 potential organizations for this organization or company. Let me show you now their mission statement. So from all, it's narrowed down to every athlete. So why do we do what we do? Is for all. What do we do on a daily basis is for every athlete. And then the vision is to remain the most authentic and connected distinctive brand. So let me look at the results of the poll online. So Erica says Nike. Shalini says Nike. Patrick says Nike. And you're right, the correct answer is Nike. So here is a good example as to how they have distinguished between purpose, mission, and vision. And that's my guidance to you in terms of helping to come up with your purpose statement as part of the framework. So the framework talks about, when we start from the big picture, it talks about the purpose must lead to trust ultimately. So if you're able to unite the world through sport and creating a healthy planet, active communities, and equal playing field for all, is a very big magnanimous role. And to be able to do this for all and be able to do it effectively, you able to create trust. So why do we do things for all? And what do you do on a daily basis for every athlete? And what do you want to be in the future? Is to continue to remain the most authentic. So the layers are very clear in terms of distinguishing between purpose, mission, and vision. So this is part of the framework that allows you to then determine your purpose statement within an organization. This is at the more tactical level, but at the more strategic level is really, are you able to engender trust, value creation, and then for the right stakeholders on a long-term basis? And at this point in time, some of you may have doubts in your mind and say, isn't the purpose all about making profits for all organizations? And the answer is yes, it is true that reading the Larry Fink's letter, the 2019 Larry Fink's letter to CEO, profits are essential if the company is to effectively serve all its stakeholders over time, and not just shareholders, but employees, customers, and communities. And the keyword is really all stakeholders. So profits are essential. And we'll soon learn that profits and purpose are not mutually exclusive. So purpose and profits are not mutually exclusive, meaning that both can coexist at the same time. In fact, they should coexist at the same time. So 2019 Larry Fink's letter very clearly puts it that profits are essential, so we cannot do without profits. But at the same time, purpose is just as important. So a lesson learned as part of this framework is that profits and purpose need to come together, and they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, both are necessary at the same time to serve the organization on a long-term basis to create value for all its stakeholders. And as part of the letter, this is quite a profound quote from Larry Fink, that he says that purpose is not the sole purpose of profits, but the animating force for achieving them. And it's challenging here because it's an abstract statement, abstract sentence. And the best way that I can show you how this links to purpose, how purpose is linked to profits and how it's animated is really by showing you the next page. So this is how it works. Purpose is an animating force, but how you animate the purpose is driven by stakeholders. So stakeholders drive purpose, and purpose drives profits, and profits drives, as you can see the familiar quote, profits drive stakeholders. So they're all intertwined. So as part of this framework to determine your purpose for your organization, your purpose must lead to profits, and profits must lead to stakeholders being happy. And when stakeholders are happy because your purpose meets their expectations. So all three must move at the same time and be synchronized. Otherwise, your purpose is meaningless. Your purpose is without direction. So purpose drives profits. Profits makes stakeholders happy. So profits make stakeholders happy. And your purpose is driven by the stakeholders to create value for them. And one of the value is profits. Of course, there are other value that you create for them. Things like job security would be a purpose, outcome of value that you create for employees, for example. There are different outcomes for different stakeholders. Profits is generally linked to shareholders, but profits are important for all stakeholders also. So this is part of the framework. So we talk about framework high level. It talks about purpose being linked to trust, purpose being linked to value creation, purpose being linked to stakeholders. This is a bit more the specific, how purpose is driven as an animating force between profits and stakeholders. So let's go down into now the guts of it. We've gone down from Zen quotes, from book quotes, to really a definition of purpose. What is your why? What is the why behind what you do? Or what is your why? And then we looked at purpose being having the components of value creation for stakeholders. And the purpose is an animating force behind profits. And profits are necessary to drive stakeholder engagement. And stakeholders are important to determine your purpose. And going that circular view, that purpose is important for making profits. So you have all the different components of purpose already. You have trust, you have profits, you have stakeholders, you have value creation. But how do we bring it all together so that you're able to choose your company's purpose moving ahead? And this is where rubber hits the road as to having a more tangible approach to determining both the purpose within your organization. So the starting point for that specific tangible framework is stakeholders. So here I want to bring up a development that occurred late last year in August of 2019, where the organization called the Business Roundtable came up with a pronouncement that it has dropped the age-old notion that corporate's first and foremost function is to maximize profits for shareholders. So it is important to maximize profits for shareholders, but it is not the one and only main focus. So shareholder value is no longer the main focus, but it's one of 5 focus for the organizations. So the purpose of the organization is not just, so in the past, prior to August of 2019, the purpose of organization, sorry for the bad handwriting, it's difficult writing using a mouse. But the purpose for organization is no longer just the focus on shareholder value, which is making profits. It has gone beyond that. And this milestone pronouncement in August of 2019, you can read the quote from here at the bottom. So the Business Roundtable is an organization of nearly 200 companies in the US. So they issued a pronouncement in August 2019 to say that shareholder value is no longer the main focus. So what is the focus then? The focus is on stakeholders. But if you don't focus on stakeholders, companies will stumble and fall and fail. And stakeholders are getting different all the time, as you can see from the recent elections in Singapore. Some of you who are from the UK may not be familiar, but the local pundits believe that the elections was affected by the millennials in Singapore as they grew up and changed the landscape for votes in the recent elections. So once again, the 2019 Larry Fink's letter to the CEOs. The same letter that, Let me just bring out the question. That purpose unifies, so purpose brings together all stakeholders and is a check. So purpose is a check on action of the organization to make sure that they don't go against the interests of stakeholders. So purpose is driven by stakeholders. And here I give you a couple minutes to read through this. The Business Roundtable, following from that pronouncement in August of 2019, focuses on 5 stakeholder groups. So no longer is it just to focus on shareholders. So the sole focus of the Business Roundtable in the past, prior to August of 2019, has been to focus on shareholders. And this has been in the past the sole purpose of the corporates. So it doesn't go away. This purpose doesn't go away. In fact, it coexists with the purpose of the other 5 stakeholder groups: the communities, the suppliers, employees, and the customers. And this helps organizations to define their purpose. So if you were to start defining your purpose statement, this is a starting point. Our purpose is to deliver value to customers. Our purpose is to invest in employees. Our purpose is to deal fairly and ethically with stakeholders, with suppliers. Our purpose is to support the community. So you see Nike's purpose statement, where they don't not just support the community, but they support everybody around the world. And our purpose is to generate long-term value for shareholders. So here is part of the framework as to how you can define your purpose statement, something very practical. So we go down into a very granular level where we move from quotes and books to a single definition of purpose, which is your why. And then we learn that the things behind purpose is trust, value creation, and stakeholders. And then we now dive into who are your stakeholders. And if you want to choose a purpose statement that's very centric to your customers, and let me just clear this. If you were to create a purpose that is centric to your customers, then your pathway is here. That our purpose behind what we do, our purpose behind what we do is to deliver value to stakeholders. So here you have, in terms of the components of purpose statement, you have the stakeholder here. We deliver the value. So value could be reliable goods which are safe at the right price for the customers. So this will then drive your what. So delivering value to customers will drive your strategy. So the why behind the what. And if you achieve the what, it will lead to profits. And what do you do with profits? You reinvest the profits into developing better products for the stakeholder, which in this case is your customers. And this is what we mean by the animating force. So the purpose is the animating force behind profits, because the profits is based on the stakeholder and based on what you deliver for this stakeholder group. And how you deliver it is a what, which is your mission, and your strategy is how you do it. So here you have a methodology that we started with the big picture as to that purpose is part of trust. And then from there, we work down into the funnel there's something that's practical, and the lowest common denominator is the stakeholder. So hope that at this point in time, for participants, you're able to see that we are going down from the very, very granular level. So this is something very practical that you can use to derive your purpose statement, or not just to derive, but able to audit your existing purpose statement and see, is your purpose statement a marketing hype? Is it just a jingle? Or does it truly drive the profits within your organization? So very practical, very, very specific. And at one glance, you're able to see whether your purpose statement is something that's useful to drive profits within the organization. So remember, purpose and profits are not mutually exclusive. You can have, in fact, you should have both at the same time and not one or the other. And here I quote Larry Fink's letter again from 2019. So every company needs a framework to include purpose in your business model and your corporate strategy. So strategy is your how. Your business model is your what. So typically business model is your mission and vision, your what and your where. Your purpose is your why. So what is this framework that complements your development of your purpose statement right now? What is this framework that brings together that business model and strategy and purpose so that you're able to then frame it in terms of your thinking? And that comes from the Integrated Reporting Council. Some of you may be familiar with this organization. Some of you may not be familiar, but I do encourage you to read the IRRC's business model framework. And it can be found here at the bottom here. So this is the very recent development, May 2020, that this diagram here is a new framework that the Integrated Reporting Council has come up with, and it's included a new segment called purpose. Unfortunately, this consultation draft that just came out does not go beyond talking about what is purpose, but it's all right, because what we have done in the preceding slides is that we have described how to get to purpose. And this is where we are. So if you were to read this diagram cold, you wouldn't know what to do with purpose, but we have come to purpose in the last few slides, and we have arrived, so we have a better feel as to what is purpose. Most companies are very familiar with mission, what they do daily, and vision, where do we want to go. But now we have understood how we get to purpose through our definition of that purpose. Start with defining who your stakeholders are, how do you create value for them, and how do you drive profits through purpose as an animating force. And profits then lead to happy stakeholders, and happy stakeholders through profits lead to a better purpose statement, and a better purpose statement will lead to more profits. So it's all intertwined. So that revolving view that you saw earlier on in this slide, where we talk about purpose, profits, and stakeholders, how they work together as an animating force to drive profits. And that's part of the mission and vision. So do take a look at this integrated reporting framework business model, because it is something that is something very tangible to start drawing your business model, where how purpose fits into that big picture. There's also a piece of research I wanted to share with you that Black Sun did last year. And it's really to confirm the point that in our survey, executives around the world believe that purpose and profit can be mutually achievable. So they're not exclusive. It's not one or the other, it's and. And that organizations are expected to combine both purpose and profits. So it's something that our research have shown over the last few years is something that cannot be ignored, that investor trust now comes at a premium. So in terms of the cost to the organization, it's not just cost in terms of making more profits for stakeholders, which we have seen in the Larry Fink's letter that's needed. It's important to keep stakeholders happy, including shareholders. But the cost, the intangible cost of making sure that you have the right purpose statement. Because if you don't have the right purpose statement that meet the expectations of all your stakeholders, then you wouldn't be able to have that animating force to drive profits and keep your stakeholder happy, that keeps your stakeholders happy. So cost is both tangible and intangible cost to the organization. And the research goes on to say that employees, as compared to all other stakeholders, are the very clear stakeholder group that wants a clear purpose within organizations so that they can have similar values between the employees and the organization. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but similar values so that they have a clear purpose to make a difference to the wider society. So that's why organizations like Nike and similar organizations have resonates well with the millennials, today's employees. And in that same survey that we did last year, the executive survey agreed that value creation discussion was most useful for employees. Most useful for employees compared to customers, which came second, and investors as a third stakeholder group. So between the three stakeholder group of employees, customers, and investors, the one that came up top in terms of importance of purpose was employees. So that's why in terms of stakeholder engagement, we find that you need to go beyond just looking at engagement scores with employees. You need to talk to them about how purpose resonates with them. So that's a good object lesson to learn, that you need to go beyond engagement, beyond the typical engagement surveys like people in organizations normally do with employees. You need to focus on, does a purpose statement resonate well with them? And that takes a complete shift in how you engage your employees. Let me clear this. So the writing is on the wall in terms of regulations and purpose. So it's not just nice letters out to CEOs. It's not just methodologies, but corporate governance codes around the world are changing to include purpose as a key thing within the corporate governance codes and requirements for organizations to adopt. And purpose is not just linked to stakeholder engagement. It's not just linked to trust, not just linked to strategy and business model, but purpose guides strategy. And same thing, the Larry Fink's letter. So like I say, it's not just all these letters, not all just frameworks, but it is now encoded within corporate governance codes like the UK. So here in the 2018 Code of Corporate Governance from the UK, so purpose is clearly stated in the code. Values, which is what you believe in, as opposed to value creation. So values are what you believe in. Strategy is how you achieve your end goals. Culture, what are the shared values within the organization. Remuneration. So you have values, strategy, culture, purpose. They're all linked. But how do you then put it all together into something that can be effected and clearly managed within an organization? And that is really indeed the challenge for organizations today. It is not so simple as meeting the expectation of shareholder, but now you have to meet the expectations of stakeholders, and then the purpose statement for each stakeholder group. And then the purpose statement for each stakeholder group must be able to animate the profits. And these profits must keep each stakeholder group happy. And when they're happy, it leads to the more refinement of your purpose statement for the organization. So you need to be very clear that there's a clear framework to achieve all these components. So whether it's values, strategy, purpose, culture, remuneration. And that framework is in that trust framework that we shared earlier on, that there are 8 components of trust. And if you've gone through all the webinars that we have today, they will all come together into a cohesive framework to bring together, to bring to life something that's very tangible to help you to implement these requirements of the Code of Corporate Governance. The rest of the codes that we've seen, like Malaysia, Singapore, they're not as specific as the UK. So the only one that talks about purpose is the UK's one, although the Singapore and the Malaysian one talks about culture, talks about the strategy, talk about values. But the UK one is the one that so far that we've seen has included purpose in there. So it's probably the most complete one that we've seen in the marketplace. Let me clear this. So how do we now bring it all together? How do we have a approach, a methodology? So let me recap a little bit. We have gone from very Zen quotes to quotes from various books, management books, strategy books. We've read 101 of them, and we have finally distilled it down to one definition of purpose, which we say the purpose is your why behind what you do, the why behind where you want to go, the why behind how you do things. So what is a why? It's that starting point. Then we talk about how purpose comprises of value creation for stakeholder groups. And if we look at the various stakeholder groups as defined by the Business Roundtable, and these 5 stakeholder groups are your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your community, and your shareholder. And for each stakeholder group, we're going to think about whether your purpose statement fits their expectations. And if it does, then that purpose statement is the animating force to drive profits. And these profits are not mutually exclusive. In fact, you need to have both purpose and profits. And profits lead to happy stakeholders, not just happy shareholders. And happy stakeholders will lead to a better statement for your purpose, or purpose statement. And purpose statement, if they're more refined, it will strongly be better able to animate more profits. And it goes round and around, like we've seen in the gear diagram that we showed earlier on. So that we are now at a point in time where we need to have that big picture again, so that you don't get confused. So we've gone from big picture to where drill down specific points on stakeholders, on how you determine the purpose statement for each stakeholder groups. Now let's zoom back out again so that you have a bird's eye view of where we are right now. So to determine that bird's eye view as where we are in right now, typically you have a tone at the top, which is the board of directors. And how do we convince the tone at the top that there's an iceberg at the bottom? You know, there's a quote here by Arianna Huffington, the famous website creator, that the essence of leadership is being able to see the iceberg before it hits the Titanic. And we all know that the icebergs, that's why the quote that you can only see the tip of the iceberg, but there's a big chunk of ice below the tip of the iceberg. And how does it all come together in terms of being able to make a difference? So the tone at the top is being driven by things that happens at the bottom of the ocean, or bottom of the iceberg. So the starting point we talked about is, who are the stakeholder groups that you need to have a purpose statement for? Who are the stakeholders and how do you add value to them? So in a lot of Code of Corporate Governance, we talk about value creation for the right stakeholder group. So here, who are your stakeholders? Now the Business Roundtable talks about 5 stakeholder groups. You can go beyond that or be even more granular. So let's say, for example, you can have students as a stakeholder group. It can be as specific as that. So don't necessarily stop at 5. But remember, the guidance is that for each stakeholder group, you need to think about a purpose statement that resonates with them. Because if it doesn't resonate with them, you cannot have an animating force to drive your profits. So who are your stakeholders? Starting point. If you're able to have a stakeholder group that you can identify well, then your purpose statement will have made a difference for these stakeholders. Do you share the same values with them, the same attitudes, the same standards, the same beliefs? So same shared values, meaning that the stakeholders' moral values and the corporate's ethical values, there's no dilemma. So the morals and the ethics of the organization come together. There's no dilemma. And once there's a meeting of minds with regards to shared values, shared attitudes, shared beliefs, then you have got this thing called culture. And we covered culture in the first webinar of this series of 8. So for those of you who have not seen the webinar, you can go to YouTube and watch the webinar on culture and how we talk about sharing values and attitudes and standards and beliefs. So culture is that glue that brings the organization and the stakeholders together, because it is a shared belief that brings them together. And once you have that shared belief, you're able to get to where you're going to go through your strategic objectives. So where you're going to go is your vision, but to get to where you're going to go, you need to talk about how to get there, and how to get there is your strategic objectives. So these are the things that is below the surface that a lot of organizations are unable to determine because it's hidden beneath the surface, the big part of the iceberg, the big chunk of the iceberg if it's beneath the ocean or beneath the sea level, beneath the ocean. So, and this is where you need to focus on. And if you get this right, you're able to get a chunk of iceberg below the ocean, you're able to get it right, then you're able to achieve your vision. Achieve your vision, which is what you do, and ultimately being able to achieve your purpose. So this gives that big picture as to how you're able to have a framework in terms of determining whether you're the right purpose within the organization. So let me recap. We've gone from a very big picture approach, we've gone very Zen. And from that approach, we have come up with a definition of purpose. And we learned that to come to a purpose statement, you need to find out as to who your stakeholders are. How do you add value? What's your value creation for each of the stakeholder groups? And to create that value, culture is important. And these three together drives profit. So profits is that. So that is the animating force that drives profits. And if the profits are to the expectation of the stakeholders, it keeps them happy. And while all this is happening at the bottom of the sea, the big iceberg, you have made a difference because what you do will be able to achieve your vision, which is where you're going to go, because you know how to get there, which is the how. And you do this on a daily basis, is what you do. Remember, purpose is something that you do on a daily basis that meet the expectations of your stakeholders. So it is something what you do. So what you do in terms is supported by how you do it, and how you do it and what you do and where you're going to go is supported by the why. And why you do it is driven by the expectation of the stakeholders. So we've gone from big picture to very granular to now to a big picture again. So with this, I hope that you have now gotten a feel as to a thinking hat, a very specific framework, very specific ideas as to how to go about determining a purpose statement for your organization, something that's practical, something that works for you, for the organization, so that it animates your profits and it both meets the profit objective of the organization and the purpose objective of the organization. And once again, these two are not mutually exclusive, that they can both coexist at the same time. In fact, they should coexist at the same time. I've included a few case studies here, and I will encourage you to go through this when you have some time. So I'll highlight them, and after these case studies, we'll go on to a discussion, panel discussion with Lakshmi from Rapid as to her views on purpose from her own personal view and from a corporate view. So some of these case studies, and which I wanted to highlight, was how these companies have highlighted their purpose statements very well through both their annual reports and also their websites. Another quote from Simon Sinek as to how companies tell their stories and how when they live their why, it creates stories for them. So the first example that I wanted to share with you is from Bank Pembangunan. This is the Development Bank of Malaysia. They just released their annual report 2019, and it's a very good case study on how they have linked purpose, their purpose, which is national development, to their values, to culture, to business model, to sustainability, to strategy. So it is a good case study. So do read through the Bank Pembangunan, which is a Malaysian government bank, as to how they brought together their stories. Next example is British Land, annual report 2020 on how their purpose statement is embedded within the chairman statement. So the tone at the top, very strong. Sembcorp, which is a Singapore conglomerate. We picked this because the purpose statement is part of their value creation and integrated into their business model. And the link between purpose and strategy is very clear. And that's really the abject lesson that we've seen in terms of best practices. The companies who are able to not just visually, but through statements by the senior people, the tone at the top, being able to link trust, purpose, strategy, mission, vision, culture, stakeholders, value creation, able to weave that story together to tell a coherent story so that the stakeholders believe that their interests are taken at heart for the organization. Those are the companies who do very well in creating value for the stakeholders. So Sembcorp, Nestle's website, purpose is very clear. This is Nestle Malaysia, how they create value, how through their purpose they create value for their stakeholders. Standard Chartered Bank's website, purpose and strategy is very clearly interlinked. And the last one is AstraZeneca. They have a video on purpose even. So the purpose, their values, their strategy is very well put together and how it achieves their expectations of their stakeholders. So these are just 6 examples of how annual reports and websites has put that story together to tell their value creation through purpose for their stakeholders. And with that, we're going to spend the next half an hour or so with a conversation with Lakshmi Rajagopalan from Rapid, which is a global payments company, fintech company. And we'll start with, I'm going to bring on Lakshmi. Welcome, Lakshmi, to the webinar on purpose. Thank you for contributing your time this evening. We got a series of 3 questions that we'd like to ask Lakshmi. Maybe Lakshmi, we can start with a bit of yourself before we jump into what your view is of purpose.
Sure. Thank you, Prof. Loh, for this opportunity to participate in this series and speak about purpose with you. As you introduced me, I work for Rapid, and Rapid is a global fintech as a service platform. What we do is we help businesses from around the world collect and disperse money via locally preferred payment options. So that's what I do. At Rapid, I am responsible for program delivery, and I work on network expansion initiatives and manage strategic clients, as well as I'm responsible mostly for these efforts where we build these options and expand our network. So for your first question on what purpose is, there's an old fable about 3 bricklayers which crystallize the meaning of purpose for me. There are 3 bricklayers all working on a wall when a passerby walks up to them and says, "What are you doing?" The first bricklayer says, "I'm laying bricks." The second one says, I am building a wall. But the third one says, I'm building a great cathedral for God. All three of them were working on the same task, but the third guy had a vision on how his daily tasks fit into this more meaningful, larger purpose. In this case, building a cathedral. So similarly, I think employees who can envision the outcome of their daily functions and look at like finding more meaning will actually find higher satisfaction from them. A teacher is not just teaching a math class, but he or she is also preparing the next generation of leaders that through their daily work. Personally, while I'm responsible for network expansion at Rapid, I'm also enabling this mom and pop store in Vietnam to connect to this vast world of international commerce. And especially in these terms, I think turbulent times, it's more important than ever that they have this access. So just going back to, if we were thinking about company values as guardrails on how decisions are being made, how you would react to situations and act on items, I think of purpose as a North Star, like a one overarching ultimate goal that guides the company on their day-to-day basis.
So thanks for that analogy about the bricklayer. So how do you advise workers? How do you advise bricklayers to go from being a task to building a cathedral from God? How do you move that spectrum from just a bricklayer to building a cathedral for God?
So I think everybody has a sense of personal purpose. It exists in us, whether we are able to consciously articulate it or not. It's that feeling where we're yearning for more, not just earning for more, and searching and finding ways to be like the better version of ourselves. So if we can reflect on that and find points where, like, in addition to just the daily work, we find opportunities that really makes our eyes light up. I think those are signs that tell you that this is something that has greater meaning to you, and because you're doing it, you're spending extra energy on it and effort and taking time away from other things. So these are signs that tell you that what activity that you're up to connects to a larger meaning in your life. And I think if you pick up on that over a course of time, you'll be able to get to a point where you can say, this is what I have been looking forward to doing with my life. And slowly a picture emerges. I mean, some people are lucky enough to find this when they're in their early 20s, but others do it over a period of time. For me, if I were to look at it as what drives me, I think using technology and making life easier for people is something that I have enjoyed doing over the course of my career. I didn't necessarily know this in my first job. I was working for an OTA, but in hindsight, that in that company, we made travel more easily accessible to a really wide range of people. At Rapid, we're continuing to do that.
So being able to make that difference lights up your eye is your North Star?
Indeed. It is, for again, personally, it is that would be something that I really aspire to, using technology as an enabler, as a differentiator, making people's life easier. That's something that really makes me excited.
And with that frame in mind as your own personal North Star, Rapid's North Star is that they help businesses thrive in any local market around the globe. How does that synchronize with your North Star and Rapid's North Star? Are they two separate stars?
So answering your first part of the question, yes, payments is the critical piece of every business. So the fact that we're in that chain is definitely a reason that allows businesses to thrive. Rapid makes it simple for any business to incorporate and scale payment capabilities. What we do is allow businesses to make and receive local payments, these payment types that are more familiar to the business as well as the customer. We recently published an e-commerce report that actually strengthens and validates this. We've been able to confirm that local digital payments are actually on the rise. If you look at Singapore, more and more people are using Pay Now and Fast, and there's a higher adoption of real-time bank payments. And it's a combination of both COVID, but also the fact that the government has invested so much money in putting that infrastructure in place. Indonesians prefer e-wallets over cards or cash. And there are still markets where, like Japan and Taiwan, that cards are still the top payment option. What Rapid's purpose is to make these options available to the businesses so that they can reach consumers and their customers who want to use the preferred payment option that they want to use. So that's what Rapid believes in. And I think it does fit into my larger purpose, which is to say, I want to work for a company that uses technology to make people's life easier. And this has never been truer than it is right now, because due to, again, COVID, the world is moving to e-commerce. And there are home businesses that we are activating through our payment network. And I think, so what I'm seeing here is using technology to make payments easier for the small businesses as well as the large players. But the whole goal is to enable commerce and make things possible, especially when movement is restricted and we have to depend on digital commerce to do this.
Okay. Now we talk about purpose being an animating force to drive profits. And when profits are made, it keeps the stakeholders happy. Does Rapid's business purpose statement fit as an animating force?
We do, I think so, yes. So just going back to what I was saying, what we're doing is trying to make local payments more easily available for people who want to use it, not just in a domestic context, but also on an international context. So yes, in that sense, it does make things more meaningful to me. As you had mentioned earlier, we have launched India, and India, as you know, is going through this phase where they're also digitally transforming, and they've enabled UPI and Aadhaar and a few other infrastructure capabilities that allows their locals to be able to use digital payments. Now, Rapid's going one step further and allowing them to not just use the digital payments within the country, but also to be able to sell to other markets, all in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the Americas. So from that front, I think it does connect well within a personal purpose, expanding profit, and adding value and meeting a real need for the stakeholders.
Okay, that's great. So if I can paraphrase you, Lakshmi, is that there can be two North Stars in the sky, and stars attract each other. So it is a bright North Star from a corporate point of view to attract another bright North Star from a personal point of view. So if there are more stars in the sky, it lights up everything.
I think personal purpose should, if your personal purpose is aligned to your company's purpose, and then there's two stars, in using your analogies, that are working in conjunction and are potentially causing a brighter light that shines even stronger. So as I said, I think everybody has a sense of personal purpose, whether they're able to articulate it or not. It doesn't your personal purpose and your company purpose doesn't always have to be the same, but
Yep.
however, as long as they are complementary to one another, I think it provides opportunities for both to flourish.
Yep.
Again, it's not just 2 plus 2. I think it's it actually is more exponential than that. So I think when your personal purpose aligns very well with your company purpose, there's this extra magic that happens where you spend more energy on it, time on it. You invest additional passion into getting things done, moving the needle, and you're able to see your work, a job well done. But also, as I said earlier, that what you're doing is contributing and fulfilling a real need in the society, and that's a really fantastic feeling.
And Lakshmi, can I ask how many staff are there in Rapid?
In APAC or globally?
Just globally.
A bit more than 200. 200?
So you have 200 North Stars, 201 plus Rapid itself. It really will brighten up the sky tremendously.
Thank you. I believe that.
That's excellent. And so let me go down to the fourth question, Lakshmi, and then dear attendees and participants, please do ask questions. We will end at 8 o'clock as promised. But if you have any questions to ask myself or Lakshmi, please do it in the Q&A function or the chat function. And with that, Lakshmi, when things go wrong, people say that it's because the company has lost its North Star, lost its sense of purpose. What do you think?
So I think, Prof. Low, you touched upon this during your presentation as well, that a company's purpose is not a marketing strategy. It's not something that you write up and then you put it on a wall and forget about it. It needs to be part of the conversation. It's a living piece of the whole ecosystem.
It's a daily thing.
It is a daily thing. It drives day-to-day decisions, and because sooner or later there's going to be a situation where choices will have to be made between short-term business interests and the long-term higher purpose that the company has. And as an example, I was reading up about the Volkswagen emission scandal that happened in 2015. So schedule conflict or higher cost drove the Volkswagen folks to actually build a defeat device. It's a software that would activate when EPA, the regulator, US regulator, Environment Protection Agency, to show nitrogen oxide levels, it's a pollutant, that was well within the permissible levels, right? But it only happened during the testing. And then it was done deliberately to deceive the US regulators.
Yep.
However, they were at the same time promoting and marketing their vehicles as clean alternatives and appealing to the millennials who were environmentally conscious and trying to set them apart in the marketplace and by trumpeting their sustainability credentials. However, the real world cars or vehicles, the Volkswagen as well as Audi branded vehicles, were actually emitting pollutants as high as 40 times the allowed amounts. So what drove that decision? The conjecture is that Volkswagen's focus on clean cars was actually driven as a business strategy and not really because of their belief in doing what is the right thing to make the world a better place. And as a result of this, when this information came to light, the CEO had to step down. The stock price went down by 30% that same week. And the scandal as of June this year has cost Volkswagen about $33 billion in fines, penalties, settlements, buyback costs, etc. And most importantly, their brand took a massive hit from all of this. So I definitely agree with the statement that when you're not focused on the right purpose for the right reasons, things do go wrong.
So thanks for that, Lakshmi. So you really need that North Star to guide the people who are lost. It's amazing. Yeah, it's an amazing case study, you know, for so many people to be involved in developing the defeat device and to put it into 11 million cars over a long period of time. It's such a toxic culture. So that's how purpose with the wrong values can lead to a toxic culture that leads to things going wrong.
I agree.
Yeah, let's take a pause there for a minute, Lakshmi. We have a question for you, very specifically for you, a question on regarding, have you got any tips for people who are struggling to find their purpose in life? Colleagues, let's say within Rapid or your working community, if somebody is struggling to find their purpose, how can you possibly help them?
So I think one of the things that would be useful for everybody is to have some white space time, whether it's once a month or once a quarter. Basically set aside some time and think about in whatever period that is, like the last month or the last 3 months, and see what actually made you happy. Like what tasks that you were doing made you happy. And some of it could just be that it was something you did with your friend at work, and therefore it was more interesting than otherwise. But eventually, for myself, what I found is there's a pattern to things that I like doing, and there's a pattern to things that makes me feel satisfied at the end of the day. So invest in that white space time where you're being true to yourself and not just saying it because you think you should say it, but really honest assessment of what made you happy, what gave you satisfaction during that time. And if you could just, think about it over, if you're doing it on a monthly basis, look at it after 6 months and see if you can discern a pattern in that. So that's one way, a very tactical way of trying to figure out what drives you, what motivates you. So that's one thing.
So Lakshmi, on spending this white space time, is it a personal responsibility, or is it the responsibility of the company, or is it a joint responsibility to make sure that you have time for white space?
I think it's a combination, because as I've said, I don't know about all the companies that you have been at, but all the companies that I've been at, there's a performance evaluation cycle, and there's a cycle where you can get feedback from others. And you could use this performance evaluation cycle as a trigger to actually do this white space analysis for yourself. So you're using, yes, a combination of your time, but also the company time to see where your performance is excellent. Where are you taking initiatives of your own, and where are you shining? And that serves both the purpose. You can use that as a conversation with your manager to see what you need to do more to fulfill some of your purpose. At the same time, you're also investing on it on a personal level to understand yourself better and see what drives you further.
That's an excellent response. So the question was from Nicolette. So Nicolette from the Working Capital, that's now perhaps you can organize a white space time for the tenants of the Working Capital. That'll be fun to have some white space time. We got another question here from the floor from Manav. The examples of purpose statements that we shared seem to be quite interchangeable. Do you think companies need a unique purpose statement, or can they have an overarching purpose which has considerably overlapped with the purpose of other companies and even their competitors? So Lakshmi, would you like to have a go answering that? I mean, What do you think? Should purpose statements be unique?
I think the way that the framework you've laid out is to say that we need to look at the stakeholders. We need to look at the how are you driving value? How are you building trust? How are you going to make it profitable, right? So I think there could be overlap between your competitors. I don't see why Adidas and Nike might not be concerned with athletes, using a previous example that Prof. Low shared. But at the same time, does a company need a unique purpose? I think so, in the sense it overlaps, sure, but there needs to be this overarching goal that helps you navigate, especially decisions that are hard to take. Southwest is a airline that most of you must be familiar with. Their purpose quite clearly is about providing their customers a cheaper alternative, like an affordable way to commute. And that helps every single person, from their baggage handler all the way from their CFO, to make decisions, which is to find the low-cost alternative to make the same thing happen, which is, get people from point A to point B. So I do think it is important for a company to have purpose, whether it can have overlap or not with their competitors. I agree there could be scope for that. Prof. Low, would you add anything on top of that?
Yeah, well, I think we need to look beyond the purpose statement and look at the components, because to drive purpose, you need to have the right stakeholder, addressing the right stakeholders, creating value for the right stakeholders, having the same shared values, shared beliefs and shared attitudes, which is culture, and then how you do things, what you do, where do you want to go. I think that combination, to me, is what purpose is all about, rather than a statement alone. It's like saying that, Lakshmi, you got a thumbprint, Wanchen, I got a thumbprint. So it's a thumbprint, right? A thumbprint is a thumbprint. But my thumbprint identifies who I am, and the way your thumbprint identifies who you are. So we may have a thumbprint, which is a purpose statement, may look similar, but the way we configure our thumbprint is different. So that's how I will characterize. So Manav, I hope that both myself and Lakshmi have answered your question. So I think it's both similar and unique at the same time.
Yeah.
So we are running close to the end of the session. We have about 5 more minutes to 8 o'clock, Lakshmi. Maybe we hear from you if Christmas was to come early. It's only July, but if Christmas were to come tomorrow, what would be your Christmas wish for all the participants, attendees tonight?
So I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by my Christmas wish. I would wish for a vaccine for COVID-19. So this pandemic has caused global social and economic disruption. It has huge, significant impact on multiple sectors. It's not just limited to like tourism or education, but it's across the board, has affected multiple sectors to varying degrees. The IMF actually expects the global economy to contract by 3% in 2020. Singapore herself is entering a technical recession, according to the estimates that were published last week. So that's on the larger picture. On a more personal note, I'm looking forward to a vacation with my extended family when the travel restrictions are lifted and the world is deemed a more safer place than it is right now. So my answer is a therapy or a vaccine for COVID-19.
Thanks very much for that kind wish, Lakshmi. We all need that times 10.
It is difficult, right? My mom and my kids' grandparents, my husband's family, they're all in India. and they haven't seen each other for a while, and we don't know when they will be meeting each other than over or FaceTime or Zoom right now. So I think, fingers, toes, everything crossed, that the medical advances find a way forward very quickly.
Thank you for that. And with that, thank you, Lakshmi, for your time. What I like to do is to take any last questions on the floor. While we're waiting for the last question, let me take this opportunity to summarize what we've covered this evening, so that you can go away with something useful in terms of a concrete framework that you see in front of your screen right now, that you can go back and look at your own purpose statement, your own personal purpose statement, your own personal North Star, your corporate North Star, and see whether they are aligned or not. So to summarize, we started from a very big picture, and we had a definition of purpose, which is why we do what we do. Then we did a dive into the specifics by looking at stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? And how do you create value for them on a long-term basis? How is driven by culture and your strategy? And strategic objectives mean your animating force, and being able to create profits and make a difference for the stakeholders. And all this while guided by what you do and where do you want to go in terms of your vision. And to string this all thing together, there are two more missing components that we have not covered yet as part of our webinar series. So the next webinar is on tone at the top. We hear this very often that, oh, the company must have the right tone at the top. But what does it really mean having the tone at the top? Does it mean that the tone at the top must understand what's at the bottom of the sea in terms of the iceberg? So we'll cover that as our next webinar, number 7, and the final webinar on how do we sustain everything moving forward. So everything is well and fine, but what glues everything together? How do we sustain it on a long-term basis? And that's really the final part of our webinar. And with that, I hope that today's webinar, this evening's webinar, has been useful for our participants. And what we'll do is that we'll share with you the slides from today, from tonight's webinar, and the link to the recording, which should be ready within the next couple of days. So on behalf of the Working Capital co-working space provider, on behalf of Rapid, Global FinTech Payments Company, on behalf of Black Sun, thank you very much, everybody, for being with us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar on the tone at the top. Thank you.
Thank you.